Morning.
Straight up 11 o'clock. We're back in session. Budget hearing for the district attorney.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
It is a pleasure to be in front of you once again. I will keep this as efficient as possible. I'm sure you are all happy to, have one more budget hearing, but we can make this as long as you like. I have the double whammy of being an attorney and a politician, so I can talk to you all you want. Briefly, the budget for the 2020 year for the DA's office was built using a 3% increase to salaries, would be a cost of living increase, and a 3.5% increase to benefits. That's a total increase to our MSA 1 of $131,123. We had some professional services and budget, contract increase built into the budget in MSA 2. Our total budget increase request for 2020 is $139,253. This represents a flat budget for the office, and of that, I think approximately 93 to 94% would be salary and benefits. The mission of my office is to provide our community with the most ethical, efficient, and well-organized district attorney's office possible, with a commitment to holding offenders accountable, giving voice to victims, and partnering with other law enforcement agencies with the goal of increasing public safety. Commissioners, as you are aware, we handle a wide variety of matters in the DA's office. Criminal cases is our primary focus. We also handle juvenile offender cases, child need of care cases, traffic cases, and involuntary commitments for the mentally ill. I have some numbers for you that I can run through. Currently, we have 950 ongoing child in need of care cases. Of those, 457 were filed in 2018. We have 786 ongoing juvenile offender cases. Of those, 526 were filed in 2018. And in 2018, we filed 142 involuntary commitments. We had a nearly record year in terms of criminal case filings last year. There were a total of 3,456 criminal cases that were filed. It's my understanding that that represents the highest total in at least 20 years for my office. I would like to take a moment and express my appreciation for the support that my office has received from this commission since my time in office. I'd also like to thank Betty for her assistance in preparing this budget and in providing ongoing support to my office. And I know this is something I say every year when I get up here, but this community is so very well served by the executive team that you have put in place. And I'm going to forget somebody, but the ones that I typically work with would be Betty, Angela, Jim, Brian, Pat, Dustin, and they're all fantastic. They're all dedicated professionals, very good at what they do. I can say the same thing for the folks in my office. We work very hard, we care a lot, and that's why we're there. And we've been able to accomplish some things in the past year that I'd like to share with you briefly, and then I will stop talking for a moment and be happy to answer any questions. So an ongoing project that took a long time to resolve was we had, well, let me back up for a second. We have statutory responsibilities to maintain case files, even when they're closed and the case happened 20 years ago. Generally speaking, these are for murder cases and for serious sex offenses that we would have to maintain these files indefinitely. And the reason is there are a number of appellate issues that can come up in a criminal case. And if we try a case, say 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we get a murder conviction, and then something comes up later on appeal, and that case gets sent back by a higher court, usually the Supreme Court, we would have to be prepared to go ahead and try that case again. And unfortunately, we've seen that happen, just this year and in the year prior. I can say none of the convictions obtained during my time in office have been sent back to this point. But the previous administration and before obtained some convictions, and those have been sent back. And we have the responsibility of doing an assessment on that case, seeing where it stands, seeing where the evidence is, and making a decision on whether to move forward or not. And part of that process is we have to maintain those records. And so we had been paying, my office had been paying in excess of $20,000 annually for offsite storage. And this is an issue where I had brought it to the commission's attention. I worked with Betty, I worked with Dustin, and we found a space here in the building that allowed us to cancel that contract and bring all of those files back in-house where they currently are. They're in the sub-basement right below us as we speak. And having them here and not having to pay for them somewhere else is just something that gives me peace of mind. And it also means access to them is a lot more convenient. It's a lot more efficient, because the old process was you got to send in a request in triplicate, and you have to wait so many days, and someone has to go pull the file, and sometimes it hasn't been filed correctly, and you're just spinning your wheels. So we don't have that problem anymore. The next thing I want to talk about briefly is our diversion program. It's something I'm extremely proud of. We rewrote the policies and put them all in clear, understandable formats on the website back when I took over. But it does take some time to see, once people get into the program, how do they do? You can say this is a great program, but until you've had people in there for 12 months, 18 months, 24 months, you don't really know what you're dealing with. And I can tell you that as of today, we are looking at a 97% success rate in terms of people who are accepted into our diversion program and who successfully complete it. That means they don't have any new crimes, no new charges while they're in the program. That is something I'm very proud of. And more than that, the use of our diversion program has increased quite a lot since I've taken office. And this is important for a number of reasons. Most people in Shawnee County, just like any other jurisdiction, most people that come into contact with the court system are not violent offenders. They're not sex offenders. Most people are dealing with any number of factors in their personal life, or a mental health issue, or substance abuse that leads them to make bad decisions. But these are not people that by law are going to be incarcerated. And sometimes the benefit to the community, the benefit to them personally to keep a conviction off of their record, it's kind of the carrot and the stick approach. It's not something that's easily measured, but it's something that we know to be true. And so the use of the diversion program has gone up, who we believe will be successful. With that, we were able to partner with the county for the upgrades to the snack area that all of us can now enjoy. I think it looks lovely in there, so well done, whoever was spearheading that project. We were also able to partner with the courts on upgrading some technology in their courtroom using some of those diversion funds. I talked about the department heads, and I don't want this to read as an endorsement. This is not an endorsement of any elected official. Excellent working relationship. I think he is focused on developing those relationships and on maximizing efficiency by putting all of our law enforcement resources to work on the same issues, which I think is really the only thing that we can do, in good conscience. I think that's what the community deserves, and that's what we're getting. So we also, another longstanding issue that I had was a IT storage. There's the file storage that I talked about earlier, but also just having the space up in the cloud. It's important because now when officers, deputies go out to a crime scene, everything's on video, and those videos take up so much space. And we were in a position where we were having to go to Best Buy for external hard drives to store some of these videos, and no expert on retention or data security will tell you that that is advisable. So we were able to work with Pat, work with Betty, and find a workable solution to that problem. So I'm very, very happy about that. I'm very grateful for it. Of course, our business is prosecution, and we did have a number of high-profile homicide convictions and resolutions in the past year, so I'll touch on some of them just briefly. In June of 2018, a young man named Daniel Munoz committed a murder. We convicted him, and he was convicted in a jury trial. At the end of 2018, he was sentenced earlier this year to a term of 56 years in prison. There was another gentleman named Arian Kurtdahl, and he was also involved in a 2018 killing, along with the Dion Troop. Both of those gentlemen were convicted and sentenced by my office. They received terms of 42 years and 30 years respectively. Matthew Hutto was involved in a double homicide last year. It was especially, to my mind, especially gruesome, the manner of the killing. He received a double life sentence. And Zachary Buck Schrag in 2018 was involved in what I would classify as a road rage killing, a shooting. He was tried and convicted by my office. He received a term of 49 years. And of course, I'm sure you're all familiar with the triple homicide that occurred in March of 17. I remember it because I had only been in the job for 60 days before it happened. And it was the day before my birthday. And so I went down to the law enforcement center and said, okay, here we go. This is it. Joseph Lowry was convicted in that matter. He received 138 years in prison. Joseph Cron had previously been sentenced to 150 years, and just recently Cora Lyles received over 100 years. Another co-defendant, Brian Flowers, has been convicted in the past year, and his sentencing is pending. So with that, I will stop talking. I did have one final issue, sorry, and more than financial support, which certainly we're requesting that increase, but we have a space issue in the office, and I know I've addressed this personally recently with the commissioners, so I know you're aware. I know it's something that's being addressed. I'm grateful for that. I was looking at some numbers on that, and I think our immediate need is for an office space between 800 and 1,000 square feet. And just preliminary research in the downtown area, the rate is between $8 per square foot up to $15 per square foot. So you're looking at somewhere between $6,400 a month and $15,000. I don't think these are. It would be my hope that we would be able to find some space on county property so we would not have to go and spend tax dollars on that. And with that, I promise now this time I will stop. So, any questions for me?
Very good. Commissioner Cook, anything for the district attorney?
Yeah, if we can, just to let you know, earlier we had a presentation from the courts. It was discussed the retrial of the Dana Chandler case. We do have money that was unused from the major homicides that we would be able to use and apply towards that. The courts were exceptionally concerned with the cost of having all the jurors come in and the cost of that prosecution. So just to make sure you're aware that since you were not present would not have been present during the discussion with the courts.
Is this in reference to the capital case fund?
Yes.
Okay. So, and my question would, for Betty and for the commission would be, are there specific guidelines on how that fund was meant to be used? Because Chandler is not a capital case. And I could also foresee some additional expenses. You know, we weren't planning on that case coming back. we were preparing as if it might, but we certainly weren't planning on it coming back. So there could be, and certainly I think in terms of experts and witness travel, we may have unforeseen expenses related to that and any other potential case that could be sent back.
The case that was commonly known as the Knollwood Nine, there was money set aside for that case as
Okay.
well. And so those were two separate allocations that the commission had made in 2016, say that range.
That range, yes.
Sounds right.
Yes.
Okay.
And so, and I think that maybe just having some discussion, I mean, because we're anticipating that those will be a 2019 expenditure as opposed to a
Right.
2020 expenditure.
Right.
And so you just might want to talk with Betty
Sure.
Yes, we'll talk
Yeah.
about it.
Okay.
about that.
Yeah, and probably I'll need to look back on when that was established, that fund was established, and what the restrictions were at the time.
And I'm sorry, and I could be wrong, and Betty will correct me when she looks at this, but something tells me that the year that the Billy Davis trial and the Dustin Leftwich trial, those were going on, those were capital cases, and there's a third one that I'm not recalling. I believe that was in 2015 when that went to trial, possibly 2014. So if it was specific to that, but I don't know the answer. I really don't.
So I just want to let you be
Okay.
aware there was some discussion during the court's budget presentation of their concerns about the cost of that retrial. In going over your expected extraordinary expenses for 2020, you've touched on a couple of them, those being the homicides, the technology needs, but also the space. Can you talk to us just a little bit more about the space needs? I mean, do you find that you're currently really at capacity, over capacity right now, and need that space pretty immediately?
Yes, I would qualify it as exactly that, just how you've said it, Commissioner. We are for now borrowing a space, as you know. There's an office suite just to the right as you come in the front doors. It's my understanding that was not given to us in perpetuity, but it was available, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to get in there and put my charging people in there. As you probably recall, they used to be housed at the Armory where the National Guard is, and my office was paying a lease for that. And I knew there was a space available here, so again, thank you for being flexible and allowing us to relocate them. There were a number of inefficiencies that were created by having them out there. I had employees stopping their work and driving back and forth multiple times a day to get stacks of paper. Just hearing that by itself just made me feel a little bit crazy. So, where we can be efficient, where we can be reasonable and use the resources that we have available, I think we have to. If that space is no longer available to us, we will need an equivalent space. But additional to that, we are lucky in that we have developed a professional office and atmosphere that people want to be a part of. So we have people coming into our office who want to be interns, who want to be full-time employees. We have people who coming in who want to volunteer and work for us for free, which is pretty great. But we actually have an issue now where we can't have, someone comes in and they want to work every day this week. Well, I'm sorry, you can't, because this space here where you would sit and do your work is being used. So we're going to have to work out a schedule to where this person will be here Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and you can come Monday and Friday when they're gone. Things like that are actually happening now.
The courts have talked about and this has been an ongoing conversation with the courts, about the need for a dedicated jury room, something that would have the capacity to hold up to 100 people maximum, but a designated area in the courthouse for jurors. Do you really see that as being a high priority like the courts do, in making sure the jurors are not contaminated by individuals or other possible witnesses, or how do you see that?
I would absolutely support that, Commissioner, and I think it's something that I've touched on in the past, but we have a lot of jurors who come in here. I will say that since my time as the DA, the total number of jury trials that we've actually had has decreased. If you look at the numbers, 16 to 17, they went down. 17 to 18, they went down. I'm not certain where we'll end 19, certainly, but we are trying to be reasonable in how we move cases. We'll resolve cases where it makes sense for both sides, and where it doesn't, we'll try the case. But regardless, we have a high number of jurors who are coming in, and to put them just give you a little bit of context. We had one day where we had 3 jury trials, and they were all going on the 4th floor. And so you had hundreds, literally hundreds of people up there who don't know where they're supposed to be, who've never been here before. They don't know what's going on. It was total chaos. You have potential witnesses in the hallway. You have people who may not like each other in the hallway. Sometimes that happens. In these cases, you might have 2 sides. You have the victim side and the defendant side. So it's a security issue. It's an issue in terms of protecting the integrity of the case. As you know, Commissioner, if, for example, jurors in the hallway and they hear a witness discussing the facts of the case, that is cause for a mistrial. That's grounds for a mistrial. What that means is you've wasted your time and resources for the however long you've been in trial, and you have to go back and start again. There's a safety concern that I would have bringing any defendant in custody charged with a serious crime through an area where we have Shawnee County citizens just standing and waiting for their time. So I think a lot of other jurisdictions do use a dedicated jury room. I would piggyback on that request and say if we were able to find that space, that also be used for the grand jury, which is something we still use and use very efficiently. And I know I've said more than probably you wanted to, but now that I'm talking about the grand jury, this is a good time for me to mention that when I took over, we had a backlog of about 2,000 cases, and through the use of the grand jury, we've been able to reduce that backlog to effectively 0. I think we have about 100 cases right now that are still in an intaking stage. It remains a very efficient use for our office, and we've refined it in different ways. But if we do get a dedicated space for a jury room, that would be my request too, and I do think it's something worth doing.
I know that the treasurers had talked yesterday about he would see a positive benefit if he was able to move the motor vehicle out of the courthouse into a consolidated space where motor vehicle was in one area for the entire county to be able to go to, as opposed to the annex and the Shawnee County Courthouse. And he saw that as being financially beneficial. It would be able to fund itself, but through the funds. The courts had talked about maybe looking down the road to where the courthouse is used for the courts only. And maybe that might be part of our ongoing discussion as the county commission, looking at a capital investiture. If we're going to be looking at a multi-million-dollar facility in the near future, rather than a community center, maybe we should be considering a $10 million administrative building for the county functions, those being the clerk, the treasurer, the register of deeds, the commission, and maybe that's where our discussion really should be focused, is that looking forward to the future and planning ahead. So, thank you.
Mr. Rippon?
A few questions. The diversion program, who makes the decision who goes into the diversion program? Is that a judge that makes that decision, or your department? Or
It's my office. It's something that we retain discretion over, and that's by statute. It's something that the court oversees because there are court filings involved, but the judge, the court, has absolutely no authority to give someone a diversion. That's something that has to come from me.
okay. You were giving some numbers here of how many child cases you had, juvenile cases, criminal cases. Do you see any trends right now? Is one of them rocketing up more than the other? Or?
I think that high number, that high criminal case number I gave you, was driven mostly by the fact that we had that backlog in place. And as you charge those cases or decline others, but as you work through that backlog, those numbers are going to jump up. Certainly, I think in 2017 we had a pretty good uptick in violent crime. We had a record number of homicides. That was very unfortunate, but it wasn't just homicides. It was aggravated batteries and aggravated robberies and aggravated assaults. It was generally just a tick that went up, and that is something that is fairly cyclical. It wasn't Shawnee County specific. It was statewide. It was nationwide. Everyone, law enforcement everywhere, saw the same thing. I don't know that more sex crimes are occurring, but I do think we are getting better at identifying when they occur.
Mm-hmm.
I think people are getting better at recognizing the signs and symptoms, especially with child sexual abuse. And so we're getting some more reports than we have in the past. I would hope that would continue, because I know from my experience that that is happening. It's going on. So the more reports we get, that doesn't mean that more of the crimes are occurring. I think we're just getting better at identifying that and hopefully holding those folks accountable.
In human trafficking, are we seeing cases that are related to that?
I'm not at liberty to talk about ongoing investigations, but I can tell you that there are things that are being worked on right now that I do believe will be in my hands before the end of this year. It's not something historically that we've handled a lot of, and part of that goes back to recognizing what it is that you're looking at, because a lot of times if you don't have the proper training, you might see someone who's being trafficked, but you don't know it. To them or to you, they look like maybe a drug addict. Maybe it's a prostitute who's a drug addict, and maybe she's got some mental health issues, and she's telling this crazy story, and well, that's just something that people say. When in reality, it could be someone who actually has been forced to ingest drugs, who's being held against their will, who gets beaten and threatened in other ways unless they're willing to perform sex acts for someone else's benefit. And that does meet the definition of human trafficking.
One other question. You talked a lot about storage, and can you scan a lot of this stuff and not have to have physical
Yes.
boxes of paper and
Yes,
mountains of paper?
Yes, and that is the goal, and that is a long-term project, and it's one that we've started to undertake, because ultimately my goal is to take my entire office digital, paperless, as much as is possible, right?
So
You're
you
never
don't have to
100%.
have.
Right.
Okay.
And we've done a number of things, and we've worked with IT. So, we have laptops we take to the courtroom now. We have wireless access points. We're updating our data management system so that we can actually pull up our case files and police reports in the courtroom in real time. That's where we're headed.
All right. And I know what you're talking about on hard drives. I had one out of Old Prairie Town that got hit by lightning somehow and fried it.
Yeah.
And lost all kinds of scans.
Yeah, there's no
and
backup
things.
for that.
And there was no backup, so.
Yep.
Fortunately, I had the original drawings yet, but the scans,
Right.
yeah. I think that's all I have.
Oh, very good. Betty?
I have a couple items.
Yes.
First of all, on the office space, you were talking about the 800 to 1,000 square foot. Is that in addition to what is right now beside the clerk's office, or is
Yes.
that including that?
No, that would be in addition to.
In addition to that,
Right.
okay. And then also you had another item on the, a capital improvement plan item that's internal network server. That was $53,000. Can you tell us a little bit about that? You had that for year 2020?
Yes, and I believe that request is now obviated due to the long-term data storage solution that's been provided to my office by Pat Oblander and his team.
So you think that one can be taken off?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, great.
Okay. First of all, as a citizen, I'd like to thank you for your service to our community.
Thank you.
I think you're doing a great job.
Well, thank you.
As a county commissioner, I want to thank you for being part of the team, and you have been a good team player. And I also wanted to congratulate you on the diversion fund and the backlog that you've addressed through the grand jury system. I am looking at space needs in the courthouse, and I think we'll be able to accommodate what you're asking for. We had a space plan that was done a couple of years ago, and it really wasn't very good. But I think we will be able to provide what you need and what the court needs, perhaps by the end of the year.
Thank you.
Finally, I also wanted to thank you for recognizing our leadership team. I can't say enough good things about Betty, Jim Crowell, Brian Cole, the whole group. We are so fortunate, and the community needs to know how fortunate we are to have such a leadership team. Also wanted to echo your comments about Sheriff Hill. I think he's a lawman's lawman.
Yes, he
and
is.
He is going to do a great job as the sheriff of Shawnee County. I'm very, very thrilled about that. If there's nothing else, we're adjourned. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you, Commissioners. Thanks, Betty.
I did want to talk to you about one thing.
Yeah.
Any plans for the weekend?
CIP.
I don't even know.
And
No, I don't think I have anything.
Nothing going on.
I was gonna go out and watch some of the softball, but I don't know, it's so hot.
I'll tell
But
you
what
what.
I am going to suggest is the first thing we do when we're looking at
Yeah.
capital outlay
Me either.
is we set aside an amount that would be.
Can we go in your office, Mike?
Sure, that'd be
small
great.
Projects that are under the 50